1958, my family, who were believers, were forced to leave Cuba. My grandmother, who lived to be 106 years, knew communism was coming. They lost their home, friends, church, and country all at once. Because of the emotional trauma, my father decided to never return. Little did my father know that out of his 6 children, one of his daughters would be called back as a missionary. In 2004, God opened the doors for me to enter with a religious visa to work in a youth camp. When I first saw Cuba from the plane, I was overwhelmed with excitement and some fear at what I would find. After all, Cuba was an isolated communist country, and I, being an American, was their enemy. After being interrogated and searched for 2 hours, I was allowed in with the understanding that I had no protection from the United States while there. What I found was a crumbling country hungry for God. How to describe Cubans in one sentence? They're warm, loud, loving, funny, educated, incredibly creative, and ready for change. On the first day of camp, I met Pastor Josvani Jimenez, and as I tell everyone, I instantly fell in love. I could sense and see that he was the real deal. Since then, I have had the honor of serving with him and his wife, Jadira. They now have 2 beautiful children, Julie and Eliezer, who also serve alongside their parents. In 2016, God allowed the first team from Crossroads to go in with me. I told the ladies, "You are making history by flying directly from Charlotte to Havana on American Airlines." The laws in Cuba are changing daily, and after 60 years, Cubans are now allowed to sell and purchase homes and land.
I have been hearing Denise share her passion for the Cuban people for many years. She would come to the mission leadership team meetings to request funds to provide Christian youth camps for teens in the summer and Bibles and supplies for the pastors. We were grateful for the opportunity to encourage the pastors in Cuba and admired Denise's obedience to go where God was sending her. We prayed for protection for Denise and that God would use her powerfully to further His kingdom. We hoped that someday God would open the door for us to send a team from Crossroads to come alongside her and meet the pastors that we had been praying for. God answered that prayer, and we sent a team of 5 women in January of this year. Pastor Josvani and his family welcomed us with open arms. They live in Cruz Verde, a small town near Havana. Ministerios Emmanuel reminds me so much of our beginnings at Crossroads. We focused on Christ and the plans that He had for us and trusted Him to provide all that we needed to accomplish those plans in us. We were grateful and did the best that we could with what we had. God provided us in all kinds of ways beyond what we could have ever imagined. Because God's hand is clearly on this church family in Cuba, they are growing. Their building's very small, and it's making it hard for them to continue to grow where they are. There's no property around the building to expand because the buildings are only a few feet apart. We asked Josvani and Yadira if they had considered moving to a larger space. I told them about our warehouse days and how we prayed for God to provide a larger space for us, and He did. They said the laws in Cuba had just changed in recent months to allow people to sell property and move. Now it was an option to look for something bigger. They had been praying for God to provide a space for them. The leaders in the church had begun the process of looking around to see what might be available. We asked them if we could see the properties and pray over them along with them. We went to 3 places. There was something very special about the 3rd property. God began to download a vision of His plans to Josvani and Yadira for the land. They saw where the church would go, their home, a vegetable garden, space to raise pigs and chickens, to help bring down the ministry costs for the feeding program. They could have children's classrooms and a large kitchen cooking meals on the main floor of the house, and then their family could live upstairs. It was overwhelming and incredible. Josvani and Yadira continued their conversation throughout the night and met us at the breakfast table the next morning and shared all the plans that God was showing them. They went from a place of overwhelming joy to how in the world can this ever happen? Cubans make an average of $20 American a month. Have you ever been there before when God gives you these amazing plans that are beyond your imagination? You get all excited, and then it occurs to you that you have no idea how this could ever happen. Scripture says that God can do amazingly more than we can ever hope or imagine. But do you dare to hope that He really will do this? We listened to all they had to say, and we agreed to pray with them about what God was showing them. We decided to bring leaders from their church and go back to the land and pray again, and to talk further with the landowner. We did that and continued to pray, and God made it very clear about how He wanted us to respond. We watched the struggle happening between joyful excitement and should I get my hopes up? How can this happen? God spoke to each of us on our team about what He was asking us to do. It was clear that God sent our team to help them purchase this land. We carefully talked through what we heard God directing us to do and then moved forward in obedience. We sat down with Yosfani and Yadira and told them that God was going to provide the funds for the land and He planned to use us to do that. They went from unbelief to overwhelmed to blessed to thrilled. Over and over in our history at Crossroads, God has shown up in amazing ways to provide for us. But He has also used us to provide for other churches and ministries around the world. God blessed us so that we can be a blessing to others. We recognize that all we have comes from God. God has used Crossroads to provide funds for water wells in India and Africa, for churches in Kenya, Senegal, Romania, Brazil, and Mexico. God has used Crossroads to help purchase buildings in Romania to house elderly homeless people and to support orphanages in Colombia and Mexico. God has even used Crossroads to help purchase an airplane to support missionaries in Venezuela. It is so humbling to me when I realize how many times that God has used Crossroads to be the answer to someone's prayers for help. It's an honor to be used by God this way. God heard the prayers of His people in Cuba, and He sent us to help them. The price of the land is about $51,600 American dollars. We've already raised over $20,000, needing about another $30,000 to cover the cost along with the wire fees. The money is due on April 14th. God promised us in Cuba that He would provide all of the money. All of our team members have given according to His direction. We are excited to see what God is going to do next.